This week on Q&A, our guest is one of the newest members of Congress, Donna Edwards. She's a Democrat from Maryland.
Representative Donna Edwards, can you remember the first moment you thought that you wanted to be a congressperson?
Well, I do vaguely remember it. My son was actually a senior in high school, and I had begun to think about what I wanted to do next because, you know, those moments when your only child is a senior in high school provide every opportunity to think about the future, an empty nest. And so it was right about then I thought about moving out of a foundation of private philanthropy that I'd been with for about 10 years, the ARCA Foundation. And I'd been very active in my community, and I thought that I could make a contribution, so I decided to run. Everybody thought I was crazy, but I decided to do it anyway.
What did you do first?
I very quietly went down to the Board of Elections in the state of Maryland, in Annapolis, and I just filled out the paperwork and I wrote my check for $100, and I didn't tell anyone. And then I decided to tell people. I told the folks that I work with first because I wanted to ask for a leave of absence. And I told my family. I didn't even tell them beforehand. I talked to my son about it. And then went about saying, okay, I'm kind of an organizer. How do I do this thing?
Those of us that live around here know the name Albert Wynn, a man you ran against in what year?
I first ran against him in 2006. I mounted my first campaign. And, you know, I had worked for Congressman Wynn as an intern, a law student intern in his law office before he came into Congress. And so I'd known him for quite some time. And so this was really not personal. It was really about the politics.
Now, he was what term then?
At that time, he was serving his 7th term. That's 14 years in Congress. He had been representing the 4th Congressional District in Maryland that sits right outside of Washington, D.C. in the suburbs. And he won by 2,731 votes, a very small percentage. It was a very close and somewhat controversial ending to the 2006 election.
Why did you take him on?
I took him on because I disagreed with him about a whole range of issues, and I didn't think that his votes fairly reflected our congressional district. I mean, in the schism of 435 congressional districts, ours is a pretty liberal one. And his voting record didn't reflect that, and I believed that we needed to have our voice in the Congress, whether it was on the war. He had voted for the war in Iraq. He had also supported an energy policy that was just really disastrous for consumers and for the environment. Bankruptcy laws that are actually now really hurting us because of protections that we don't afford for homeowners right now who are losing their homes. And so I disagreed, and I thought it was actually important to kind of elevate that disagreement by running against him for Congress.
Now, he is a Democrat and an African American.
Yes, he's a Democrat and an African American in a very solidly Democratic district, and so it doesn't happen very often that these inter-party challenges come up, and it's why I think so many people wrote me off in 2006.
And he said that you were part of the vast left-wing conspiracy. I can't even say it. When did he use that phrase?
Well, he used it in the 2008 campaign when I ran against him again and then ended up winning in the primary election because I was associated with a lot of labor unions and environmental organizations and women's organizations. And the irony, of course, is that these are the sort of base of the Democratic Party, so it wasn't an argument that carried over very well.
What's the district look like?
The district is quite diverse, and it spreads around the suburbs, the immediate suburbs of Washington, D.C. And so I live in Fort Washington, Maryland, which is just outside of the District of Columbia, and it stretches all the way across Prince George's County and through the eastern part of Montgomery County, all the way up to the Frederick County line. So it's a pretty vast congressional district, not unlike a lot of congressional districts, but it does take me a couple of hours to drive from the southernmost point where I live to the northernmost point of the district. It's about 65 miles.
And what's the racial mix?
It's about 55% African American, so it's a majority African American district. A solid group of white Americans also make up the district, and we have a really strong Latino and other new immigrant population in the district, but quite diverse by income, by race, by interest, and so it's a fun district to represent.
Would it be fair to say that it may be the most successful concentration of African Americans in the United States?
I think it's really fair to say that. It is. It has, reportedly the highest per capita income of African American families in the country, represented in our congressional district. High percentage of African Americans who hold both bachelor's degrees and graduate degrees. So very successful community. Not that we don't have our challenges, because like any congressional district, we have some pockets of our district that are in extreme poverty and need, and it's important in representing the district, I think, to take into consideration what happens sort of in the more affluent areas outside of our Washington Beltway and inside the Beltway.
So this year, 2008, what happened?
Well, this year, I think one of the things that happened is that after I lost in 2006, it actually felt like a win, because to mount this challenge, basically coming from nowhere against a longtime incumbent and coming that close, I just never stopped. I continued to go to church services and civic association meetings, and in 2008, it paid off with a primary victory win on one of the coldest, rainiest, snowiest days ever on February 11th in 2008.
So you beat Al Wynn.
I beat him in the primary election, which apparently doesn't happen against incumbents, or rarely happens against an incumbent. And then he decided that he was going to step down early, and so it created a vacancy, and I won in a special election in June.
So you ran in the primary, beat him.
Correct.
And he still was a congressperson until the end of this year.
Oh, well, he was the he should have been the congressperson until the end of the year.
But he quit to lobby.
Yes, he did.
In the Dickstein and Shapiro law firm here in town.
Yes, he did. And
now,
what
do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I think that commitment to public service is really a commitment, and I know that even outside of public service, when I've held other jobs, and I've had to leave, you leave with some notice and you stick to your commitment. And I think a lot of people in our congressional district, frankly, thought that he walked away from his commitment. But be that as it may, I mean, I stood for the special election and won that in June, and then just won a general election in November for the 2-year term that I won the primary election for in February. So 3 elections in 1 year.
How much money did you have to raise for all these elections?
I raised a total about, $1.2 million, $1.3 million.
For the whole year?
For the whole year.
I'm going to jump into some, if you go on the internet, you can find you everywhere, lots of video, big change from days gone by. So let's jump to a July 17th, 2008 speech. Before we run it, though, set up what's the group? It's the Netroots group. Well,
Netroots is a community of bloggers and people who really use the internet to do advocacy and to speak about public policy and to organize. And I had been communicating with and through the Netroots for several years, actually. In my life at the foundation, I had helped actually fund some work that was to develop a more thriving internet community. And so when I decided to run for Congress, we really wanted to use the internet to organize, to raise money, to raise awareness across the country about the campaign. And so once the campaign was over, I got to go and speak to their big convention of Netroots activists from all around the country.
So it was 1 month after you had won, or was sworn in?
It was 1 month after I was sworn in. I think it was in June 2008.
The day of the speech was July 17th, 2008.
So it's 1 month exactly from the time that I won the election, June 17th, 2008.
Do you remember where it was? What city?
And it was in Austin, Texas.
Okay, let's just run a minute of it so we can get the flavor.
I've made a couple of discoveries since I've joined that raucous caucus, as I like to describe it. And one of those discoveries is this. Sometimes I'm sitting in the room, and I know that this is, probably being recorded someplace, but I'm going to say it anyway. These are my colleagues, but I sit there and I listen, and I have to think for a minute, oh my gosh, did I join the Republican conference? I whispered that. But part of it is because we do have such diversity among Democrats. But I want more and better Democrats because there has to be a balance. And right now we don't have that. We have a part of our party that's really driving the agenda. And we need more voices like mine, like yours, in that Democratic caucus. And so our work is cut out for us.
Raucous caucus. The Democrats?
The Democrats, absolutely.
Sound like Republicans?
It is really a very diverse caucus, and I think, part of the reason that we've attained the majority in some of these districts is because we've won in districts that are really Republican-leaning, and so, of course, those districts are, more conservative, certainly, than the one that I represent. And I think it's in part the reason that I've known for a long time that when I decided to run for Congress, I wanted to make sure that we had a fair representation of the left-leaning part of our party in my congressional district, because all the more reason we need that to balance out what's happening in some of the other congressional districts.
So if I ask you what's the most left-leaning position you take on anything, what would it be?
Well, sometimes I'm not even sure I think about it like that. I do know that I feel really strongly about workers' rights to organize and form unions and to bargain collectively. I feel really strongly about aggressively moving toward climate change, policy around climate change that really is going to make a difference, sort of lowering carbon emissions. Those are sometimes described as left-leaning positions. And I think that we ought to have an approach to the world that's about diplomacy and engagement as the first order of business and not about war.
Later on in this speech, you talked about the president-elect, and he wasn't elected yet. He was just the nominee of the Democratic Party. So let's watch and see what you had to say about him.
As I look through the presidential campaign, I was an early Barack Obama supporter, and I'm really proud of that. But it doesn't mean that the presidential candidate that we have, the nominee that we have to stand behind now, that we have to be silent when that nominee is not saying the things that need to be said to our community and doing what we need to do for this country. And that's an important lesson. And it's a lesson that I learned actually when Bill Clinton became president. Because when Bill Clinton became president, many of us on the left, among liberals and progressives, became very silent. And that was a mistake, because that mistake brought us some policies that were really not so great. And so we can't make that same mistake with President Barack Obama. But we need to be on the job today to make sure that he and not John McCain is elected as president of the United States. And don't be fooled about that.
So what do you think so far about the cabinet?
Well, I'm excited about it. I mean, I think the president-elect has made choices that are going to allow him to move aggressively on some things that I know, ideas that I know that he shares and that I share with him. And I'm looking forward to some of the other appointments, too. And more than that, I'm looking forward to the work that we begin in January as a Congress to move a forward-thinking agenda that I know that the president-elect shares, and so it's going to be an exciting time. But I think I did mean what I said in that clip, and that is that it's really important to have a balance and for the voices on the left not to be quiet, because it'll make all the policies that we get, whether it's on health care or energy policy or infrastructure investments, all the more stronger.
So as you sit in Congress looking down toward the White House and all the new appointments, who do you see that's on the left?
Well, I look, for example, in terms of the president's domestic policy advice, somebody like a Melody Barnes, for example, somebody that I've known for quite some time, and I think that she's going to bring a very forward-thinking set of ideas around health care. Just as an example. So there will be plenty of them. And I think that more importantly for the organizations that are on the outside, and I used to be part of those organizations, it's really important for them to stand up and to make their voices heard through community organizing and civic activism around the country and in every congressional district. And when that happens, it'll make those of us in the Congress a lot stronger, and it will certainly give the president the backbone that he needs to move forward on some of these policies.
So what did you really think when he asked Bob Gates to stay on as Secretary of Defense?
Well, that's a tricky one. I mean, I think continuity is important. I know that it's not for long term, and I think on these issues of defense policy, I mean, the President-elect said he's going to be the one to really, to set the agenda and the policy. And I think any time that you have members of a cabinet who may offer a differing position internally in debate, it's going to be President Obama's decision about how to move forward. And I know that he's committed to bringing our troops out of Iraq, to engaging in the world diplomatically and taking a different turn where this war is concerned. And I think Bob Gates wouldn't be staying on board if he weren't committed to the same goals.
So do you expect him to have every troop, every member of the armed services out of there in 16 months?
Well, I think it's possible. I think, at least a number of folks who are in the military leadership have said that it is possible. Now, whether there will remain some residual troops there to maintain an embassy and those kind of things and sort of functionaries for technical advice, I think that's a different question. But combat troops, absolutely, it's possible.
So how much could be left there, in your opinion? I mean, they've got that huge $700 million embassy that has not been opened. Several, I think 21 buildings or something like that, and they got the huge bases there. What if they decide they want to keep those bases?
Well, I think it's going to be time for particularly soon-to-be Secretary of State Clinton to offer up some advice about the kind of diplomatic mission that needs to remain there. I think what's been developed thus far is much more of a military mission than it is a diplomatic mission, and that I see as a change of direction for this administration. And so I want to wait, like others, to get an idea of how they believe they can scale back and be one of the voices in the Congress that either pushes them farther or says, okay, you're on the right track.
So what would this president-elect have to do to make you mad?
Well, I imagine there could be a couple of things.
You refer to this business about, we're not going to remain silent. We remained silent during Bill Clinton's. What did you remain silent about during the Bill Clinton years?
Well, I look back, for example, when there was an opportunity to really seriously engage on both on health care policy, on energy policy, and on many of those things. Many of the organizations I know, for example, some of the environmental groups, we stepped back a little bit. I recall I was running an anti-domestic violence organization at the time when we were working on welfare reform, and I think that we were silent in so many ways there, and I think we got it wrong, and that we've had to, sort of tweak over the years, and we have an opportunity in the Congress really to provide some stability for poor and working families, and I hope we're going to have an opportunity to rethink a number of those policies as we go forward.
What did you get wrong on welfare?
Well, I think on welfare, for example, not providing the kind of stability that families really need to move from welfare to work, with transportation assistance, with additional daycare assistance, and those sort of things that really stabilize families. We should have done that really, a lot earlier. I think today, one of the things that we're seeing is in these tough economic times, we're going to see more and more people turning to public assistance, and I don't think that's something that we really have planned for. But I'd like to see us make real investments in working families, training them for jobs for the future and for the 21st century economy, and making sure that our children get the kind of prenatal care and other kinds of health care that they need, so that their families can move out of poverty and into the middle class. And we'll have an opportunity for those things. It's a tough economic environment, though.
You gave a speech to the SEIU. What is that? It's
the Service Employees International Union, one of the strongest, fastest growing unions and most dynamic unions in the country, and I was pleased to actually have their support during my campaign. But they're also a union, along with a couple of others with whom I've worked for many, many years.
Now, you gave a speech in June of this year, right after you got elected.
Right after I was elected, and it was up in Canada.
Let's watch, because you've got you say some strong things here in a minute about what you're going to do in the future. Let's watch this.
To all you banks and credit card companies that just got away with just about everything over the last 20 years, game over. we're going to say to the oil and gas companies, you know what? Your good times, gone, gone. We're going to say to the likes of Walmart and every other mart, you cannot take advantage of workers here in the United States only to take advantage of workers around the world and get away with it. Game over.
A lot of enthusiasm there. Is the game really going to be over?
The game's going to be over. I mean, we're going to see a change in direction on, I believe, on trade policy. I mean, we're already seeing it in the market place where we realize now that having gone, more than a decade not regulating banks and credit card companies, that is worked to the great disadvantage, not just to our domestic economy, but to the global economy. And we're going to, I think we have a president-elect who's really committed to re-regulating in a helpful way so that we can maintain protections for consumers and protections for our economy.
So if you're a banker right now, you run a credit card company, what should you be looking for in the future?
Well, I think, I want to look again at these high interest rates that are being charged with consumers. I know we've tried to tackle these issues in the Congress, but it's just not acceptable to charge people 30% interest rate on a credit card and to continue to prey after consumers. My son is 20 years old. He's in college. He doesn't have a job. He relies on his mother for his every dime, and I have a stack, inches and inches high of credit card applications that continue to come to my home for a young man who doesn't have a job.
Stop
not
just there
acceptable.
for a second. I want to show the audience a clip of your son after you were, I think the day you were sworn in, and you say he's 20?
He's 20.
Doesn't have a job. Is he in school?
Oh, he's a junior at Drew University.
Drew University?
Yes, in New Jersey.
Okay, let's watch this.
How you doing? I'm Jared Coleman, Donna Edwards' son, and I just wanted to say hello to everybody and introduce myself. And that I couldn't be prouder of my mom on this day that she takes office, and she's bound to do great things.
She's already voted?
She's already voted twice, and this is the start of a great thing.
Had you seen that?
I hadn't seen that.
So tell us about him and what you want to do for his life with this, just a simple thing like a credit card.
Well, he's my heart. My son, Jared, is 20 years old. He's a junior at Drew University. And the irony, of course, he's majoring in economics. So we have a lot to talk about these days. But I want to make sure that we have a robust economy for him and for his peers and for their children, and that we provide the kind of opportunity that they need to continue a successful United States of America and global economy. And I think that we can do that. I want to make sure that he has a job when he gets out of college because, tired of supporting him.
But how do you physically, or whatever word, legally prevent a credit card company from charging 30%?
Well, I think that what we can do is we can look at, at what may be actually predatory practices as these interest rates actually escalate. I think, as well, when you look at the credit markets and what's happened in conjunction with home loans and mortgage foreclosures, and some of the interest rates that are being charged on mortgage loans that have really jeopardized people's ability to keep their homes. I think about my own congressional district, and we have some of the highest rates of foreclosure in the state of Maryland in my congressional district, and it really is because of these practices. And people have always wanted more than they can afford. We just have had a system of regulations that doesn't always allow that to happen. And I think we need to get back to a point where we're really looking at industry and industry practices and making sure that they truly are consumer friendly.
Where is all this money going to come from to pay for all? We ask this question here a lot. No one really has an answer other than they say printing press. Where does the money come from?
Well, there are a couple of things that I think we're looking now in the Congress at an economic stimulus package that the President-elect really supports, and I guess we'll get to that in January. But I look at those things as deep investments. I think about our roads, our rail, water and sewer infrastructure that we haven't invested in many decades, and that's about job creation. It's about giving people a paycheck to put back into the economy, a paycheck to pay taxes, and then to set priorities that make sense for the American people. And I'm looking forward to the President-elect's, one of his calls to really look deeply at our budget and get serious about straightening our budget out and weeding out the garbage. And there's a lot of garbage in there.
How do you weed it out when it's way out of balance now? And if the predictions are true, it'll be $1 trillion deficit. I mean, where does it all, who understands where the money's really going right now?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I do think that these things will all not come at one time, and I think we're going to see the President-elect's first budget and see how he begins to make a stab at taking a serious look at our budget and saying, what can stay, what's really necessary, and what needs to go. And I think too often when we get to those considerations, things that are about human needs go first. And I think we have to reverse that pattern. We've also got to take another look at our tax structure, quite frankly. I mean, I think we have a tax structure that is that's out of balance, and looking at the highest end of our earners and making sure that people are paying their fair share, and so that the burden doesn't fall against the people who are working the hardest.
So 2 years from now, what's your sense? I mean, what would be cut? What part of this budget would be cut? Enough so that it would make a difference?
Well, I mean, I think you've got to take this in pieces. I mean, the budget is so massive. But for example, I mean, you look at our defense budget. We're still underwriting a whole set of old Cold War weapons systems that aren't even necessary anymore, that our own Defense Department doesn't believe are necessary, yet we continue to fund them. So there are a set of things there. And I've never been a great fan of of earmarks and budgets, because I think you take things out of the general appropriations process, and so I'd like to see us, really, make certain that we're bringing things in line with our process, so that we're examining the budget in a healthy way, and we're examining spending priorities. And not that I think this business of kind of attaching yourself to earmarks and making sure that everybody knows it's this one is yours is really an important one for transparency, and that doesn't make up a huge amount of the waste, frankly, in the budget. It comes from things that are already in the appropriated process. But we can look at sort of agency by agency and department by department and seriously examine that. And I believe the commitment that the President-elect has made to doing that. And is it going to come in the first 2 years? I don't think so, but it's not a budget that we've developed in the first 2 years either.
Well, let me just try this one out. We've got 12 aircraft carriers. Mm-hmm. Do we need them?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. I mean, those are good questions. Do we need how many more contracts do we need for tanker systems? But it isn't just in the Department of Defense. I think we have expenditures in agriculture. We have expenditures. Some of our agencies that are actually deeply underfunded for the work that they need to do. For example, the Food and Drug Administration, in terms of overseeing our sort of food and drug market. I think deeply underfunded in the Environmental Protection Agency, which could save money in the in the long run. But I want to be in a position to begin to examine those things, and I think it's in part why I've been seeking some additional committee assignments, Brian.
You talked about oil and gas.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think you can change there?
Well, I think, one, we can change the way we do or don't subsidize industries that are big contributors to carbon emissions. I was deeply troubled, I guess it was in 2005, by continuing to subsidize these older industries instead of encouraging investment in new technology that really does something about climate change. And it's those kind of policies, Brian, that I think really lead us, down a path of making investments that really don't have any chance of really paying off in the future.
You were born in North Carolina.
Yes.
What were your parents doing there?
Well, my mother's from North Carolina. That was her home, and my father was stationed overseas, I think, at the time, or stationed away. And so my mother, in the sort of tradition of Southern households, went back with her family to have me, and that's where I was born. And we still have a lot of family down in North Carolina. And then my mom and dad joined back up together, I guess, in this area. My dad was stationed at Andrews Air Force Base Air Force when I was very, very young, and then we moved all over the place.
Where?
All around the country. We lived in Dayton, Ohio, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We lived in California and down in the Southwest, and traveled up north to Alaska. We lived in the Philippines for a time. So it was a great upbringing.
When you were sworn in that first day, your mother was up in the gallery, and I think at least 3 of your sisters, maybe more.
My mother, 2 of my sisters, and my brother, I think, was there too.
Now, is your father still alive?
My father's not. My father died about 20 years ago.
Really?
Yes.
And how long did he spend in the service?
He was a long-termer, I think 25 years, a little over 25 years.
You went to Wake Forest, and you also went to Franklin Pierce Law Center up in Concord, New Hampshire. Why did you pick Wake Forest, and what did you study?
Well, I went to Wake Forest. It wasn't quite happenstance. It was a deliberate choice, but I was accepted actually into the first class of women in the Air Force Academy and over at the Naval Academy. And at the last minute, I decided I didn't want to do that, and so I ended up going to Wake Forest.
That's all. It paid you to go to the academy.
I know. How about that? But they paid me to go to Wake Forest too. that was very helpful. And so I ended up at Wake Forest. I loved the campus. I loved the environment. It's a terrific learning environment. Really great school it was then, and it is now. And I just can't say enough about my experience there.
So where did you get your interest in what you initially studied, and why did you go to law school?
Well, I majored in English with a minor in Spanish at Wake Forest University. I went to study abroad my last year at the university. In fact, I was so intrigued with being in the south of Spain that I stayed there. I was waiting tables down in Sevilla, and my dad called and said, "Donna, I think it's time for you to come home and get a job." And so I came back to the United States, and I worked for a very brief stint, a couple of years at the United Nations Development Program. I was always interested in international policy. Deep back in the back of my head, I think when I was in high school, I always wanted to go to law school, and it was a question of putting the time together and the money together to be able to do that. And I did spent a little bit of time in the space program at NASA. Worked on the first Space Lab mission, which is now 25 years old. And then when the Challenger blew up, and that was one of our missions, I had to kind of rethink what I wanted to do, and it was then that I decided to go to law school.
So how many years were you with NASA?
I was there, I think, 6 years.
Was that when you were with Lockheed?
It was when I was with Lockheed. Great experience.
Did you ever think of becoming an astronaut?
Yes, but bad eyes, bad legs.
Didn't work.
Yeah.
So then, what was it that got you? I mean, you clearly tell us in all the speeches and everything, you're a progressive, you're a liberal. Mm-hmm. You're not afraid to say that? No, not at all. Not at all. And I grew up that way. I mean, my dad was a progressive and a liberal in the United States Air Force. I grew up, and it was, sort of really at the height of the Vietnam War, and I can remember conversations around our dinner table which were always political. My mom and my dad and my sisters, and I mean, all of our conversations at the dinner table every single night we ate together were always about politics and about what was going on in the day, whether it was in, what was going on in Washington or what was going on in whatever state legislature it is in the state that we lived in. And so I always held an interest in politics. I worked on my first political campaign for a Democrat who was running for governor in New Mexico, Jerry Apodaca, when I was 15 years old.
And I've just always had a political bug, and so I've worked on other people's campaigns, worked on, doing organizing, and framed my politics at a very, very young age. My dad and my mom were, tremendous, civil rights activists. We talked about those issues all the time. And my dad actually grew up in a really tough area in Philadelphia, in West Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and his escape was joining the Air Force. And he would tell us all the time that had that not happened, he would have been among, who knows, the many tragedies of the inner city. And so we always had, and I grew up with a deep commitment to communities and to improving lives. And when I first got out of law school, I had a chance to go to big law firms and decided instead I wanted to practice in the public interest, worked for consumer advocacy groups, founded the National Network to End Domestic Violence, which is the largest network of anti-domestic violence organizations in the country. And so I've had the great benefit of being able to really live my dream in policy and politics.
You hit on something very early about being an intern in Albert Wynn's office. Senator Blanche Lincoln was, I think, and I shouldn't say this because I've just heard this story, was a receptionist in Congressman Alexander's office before she beat him. Mm-hmm. What did you learn about Albert Wynn when you worked as an intern?
Well, I mean, I was in his law practice, and so that was actually before he ran for and came to Congress. And so I really wanted to learn what it was like to run a small law practice, because I'd been thinking, well, maybe when I get out of law school, I'll, hang my shingle and run a law practice. And I decided it wasn't cut out for me, but he was a terrific boss. I learned a lot from him in that practice. Got to file an awful lot of pleadings during that summer that I worked for him.
What did he say to you when he saw that you were going to run against him in 2006?
Well, it was tough. I think he took the challenge. I think seriously, certainly in 2008. I'm not sure early on that he took it really seriously quite seriously in 2006. But we tried to have a healthy conversation around that. People used to ask me whether I went to him to tell him that I was running, and I didn't do that. I just filed and decided to run.
Did you ever have a personal conversation with him after you had decided to run against him?
No, I didn't. And it was really clear. We had a number of debates and public forums that this was really a disagreement about issues. I think he made that clear, and I did too. But it's never really easy, especially in a somewhat small community, to mount a campaign like this. And so it was tough going there for a while.
Did he debate you?
He did.
How many times?
Oh, a number of times. We must have debated, at least a half dozen or more times.
But when you then ran against the Republican, you dropped out of what I read somewhere 3 different debates?
Well, I didn't, actually. At least a couple of them were scheduled in the middle of the day while we were taking votes over on the Hill, and so I wasn't going to go and do a debate then. But my Republican opponent, actually, in the general election, and I had appeared in more than a half dozen forums together during the course of the primary election as well. And so I felt like, throughout our community, people had a very clear idea of the difference between, his ideas and mine, because we had appeared in so many forums together over the course of, 6 months or so.
I want to go back to the Netroots Nation website speech from July 17th. And you're talking about being in the chair in the House of Representatives. Yes. And when you're a freshman like that, do they just say you get that, you get the duty?
You do get the duty, and you can have it as many times as you want it. And so I love doing it, though.
Let's watch a little bit.
Sure.
And so there I am the other day, and I'm presiding as Speaker Pro Tem of the United States Congress. It's a really big chair. But there I am, and I'm presiding, and I'm listening to an argument, endless arguments by my colleagues over on the Republican side. And drill, 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 drill. That's all they talk about, drill, drill, drill. And the American public is smarter than that. We know that if we started drilling more today, that we actually won't even find any oil for like 10 years, so that's not going to lower that to under $50 at, on filling my gas tank. The American public knows that we're losing oil, we're not gaining it, and so no matter what we do, the price really is never going to come down again. The American public knows that in order to make a difference so that our children and our grandchildren have the benefit of a planet that really works for them for the future, that we have to make mass investments in things like mass transportation and renewable energy. I mean, the American public knows that, and it's time for us to stop playing games with them. It's time for us to be honest with the American public about what our energy future is.
Who's playing games?
Well, I think, the whole entire conversation over the course of August, suggesting that somehow if we just keep drilling and drilling for oil, that's actually going to relieve us of what is an inevitable challenge for the future, that oil is running out. It's a depleting resource. And I think that it is gamesmanship to pretend to the American public that somehow that's going to solve our energy problems. And it really is not. And I think people are just smarter than that. They know that we have to make a different kind of investment for the future. And I just want us to engage in a debate about public policy that's real. And hopefully I can bring that kind of spirit and voice to the Congress. And I think not having been a politician, brings something different to the Congress. It's a little different outlook. And people ask me all the time, did you serve in your state legislature? Were you on your county council? I say, no, the last election I won was 11th grade class president. And it just brings a different perspective about having an honest conversation with the public about the challenges that we face and the solutions and the cost.
Now, the money that you raise, I got on OpenSecrets.org and see that almost all the top money givers were unions. Mm-hmm. So do you feel, you talk about the special interest, aren't those unions special interests?
Well, not when you represent millions of individuals who make contributions to those unions so that the union itself can write the check. I think that's a very different kind of interest than a corporate interest, quite frankly. Those are real working people, get up every day and work hard for a living, and I think it's important for me to represent those interests. And the more interesting is that until I won, I think, the primary election, I really didn't receive that many contributions from unions at all. In fact, many of the sort of Democratic stalwart donor base didn't contribute to my campaign because I was running against an incumbent Democrat. It was only after I won that those contributions came in.
You said in one of your speeches that the Washington Post ignored you in the early days.
Yeah, well, at first, and then they paid attention, and by the end of the 2006 campaign, the Washington Post actually ended up endorsing me over Congressman Wynn in that first election.
But you said the consultants don't pay attention to them because they tell you can't win.
That's right. They do.
Did you hire any of them?
Well, I did. One, I hired Celinda Lake, who is at Lake Research, and I've known Celinda for many, many years, working on a number of advocacy campaigns, and I went to her and I said, I need your help. And she was sort of the one consultant who stepped forward and said, I'm not afraid to help you. It's such a, the political consulting class is, it's somewhat incestuous, and they depend on each other so much that they're afraid to take on somebody like me, an outsider, because if you lose, then they figure that there's a price to be paid for that. And so very few of them were willing to come on board. I didn't even have a campaign manager when I ran in 2006. I had a couple of staff people who had never worked on a political campaign ever. And we came within a couple of percentage points. And then by 2008, I was able to at least reach out to some of the brave consultants who were willing to take me on.
So why did you beat an incumbent Democrat, African-American, 7 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives? What was it, do you think? Put a couple things on the table. What was the first reason?
I think the number one reason is because I took a message out to our congressional district that was about change and that focused on his record over those then 8 terms.
But how did you convince them? I mean, what were the techniques you used to convince individuals to vote for you?
Well, we ran quite a grassroots campaign. I mean, we knocked on doors, we made telephone calls. I stood at every metro stop in our congressional district talking to voters, and in the morning and evening commutes, made telephone calls to them. I went to every civic association meeting. I went to churches and community groups, and whether it was a group of 10 people meeting or it was a group of a couple of hundred people meeting, I would show up and engage with them in a conversation, and talk to them about listening to them. Our congressional district, I don't know if it's unique, but we have so many people who work for the federal government in every agency imaginable. They've worked on policy over here on the Hill, and they live in my congressional district. And so they're smart, and they understand government, and they have a lot to contribute, and no one ever listens to them.
You said some interesting things in your speech to the Netroots Nation about health care for members. Let's watch this and see you explain a little more.
I was told before I joined the Congress that everybody wants the health care that members of Congress have. Can I just tell you something? You don't want that. I mean, I'm paying $350 a month for my son and I to have health care. That's not health care that's affordable for the American public. And so we know that we want a health care system that isn't about propping up an insurance system. So, the next time you hear some candidate or some politician say that they want to deliver to the American public the health care system that members of Congress have, can you please just tell them not? Can you please just tell them, no, we want quality, universal, affordable, accessible health care for our small businesses, for our young people, for people like me who are, aging. We want health care not because it is something that's just kind of an aside. We want it because it's a right and we deserve to have it.
Number of things I want to ask you about. Don't want to prop up an insurance system. How could you ever stop that?
Well, we don't have to have a healthcare system that runs through insurance companies. I mean, there certainly are nations, across this globe that have healthcare systems and deliver healthcare without an insurance system.
Do you think that's really possible to change that with all the money they give to politicians?
Absolutely, I think it's possible to change it. I think the American public is demanding that. I had an experience with my son when he had an accident. He was playing basketball, came down on his head, and he needed an MRI. And there was a 24-hour MRI center, and I wanted to go there to get the MRI instead of going to the emergency room. My insurance company told me I couldn't do that. Well, if I had gone to the 24-hour MRI center and gotten it, it would have been cheaper than going to the emergency room where I was forced to go because the insurance company said I had to get it done through the emergency room. We don't need a system in which people who aren't actually experienced at delivering health care are telling us about the kind of health care services we should access, and I think that's the system that we have now.
But if you just think about these are companies in operation, whether it's the oil companies or insurance companies that have a tremendous stake in this process, and they're all over this town in everybody's campaign. Would you take money from an insurance company?
Well, I don't think an insurance company has given me money. If I can go back and check, I actually don't take any corporate campaign contributions.
None at all?
None at all. None at all.
Why not?
Because I just don't think it's really necessary. I'm happy to meet with, any corporation or interest group that wants to talk about the issues of concern to them, but I don't want to be tied down.
But as you know, the corporations are all over this town. They're involved in the inauguration funding. You name it, they've contributed to the Barack Obama campaign. I mean, you really think you can change that?
Well, what I think is there are a couple of things. One is that I think that the public increasingly is demanding more accountability from all of our systems. And whether you talk to small businesses in my congressional district or any district in this country, and corporations, are suffering because they're paying, to the extent they're paying for health care, they're paying a lot for health care, and it's not affordable. It's not a system that's affordable anymore. And so we actually are driving ourselves to a point where we have to make not just minor changes in the healthcare system, but major changes, and I think the public expects that. And so I'll be that voice, along with a number of other voices in the United States Congress, really demanding that, and demanding us to kind of sever the link between insurance and quality, affordable healthcare delivery.
Why does everybody say they want the same healthcare system that the House members have? And I totaled it up, it's $4,200 a year for you.
Yeah, I think it's, I think they say it because, it sounds good, and we have a system, thank goodness. I mean, there are so many workers across this country who don't have any kind of health care at all. I'm just saying that our goal can't be the model that we have for the House. It has to be something different that really works for all families across income spectrums. I happen to now have the ability to afford that health care. I remember a time when I didn't have health care at all, and I got really sick, and I ended up in the emergency room, and I ended up with thousands of dollars in health care bills that sunk me for years. And so I know what it's like to go without health care coverage, but also to need health care. And I think that we can create a system that really is affordable.
What do you think of the perks of House members? Free parking?
We do have free parking.
You have a medical facility there in that Capitol in case you get sick?
We do.
Is that free to you?
No, it's not. Actually, it's billed to our insurance companies if we, get services there, or if we, get services through. We can get services, I think, through Bethesda Naval and Walter Reed, but our health care insurance provider is actually billed for those services.
So if you get sick, you could go to Walter Reed or Bethesda?
Can do that. That's right.
How about retirement? How does that work?
And we do get retirement, and I'll be honest with you, I don't really quite know how it works yet. I know that I do make contributions actually to our own savings plans, but that's part of my salary that I contributed, as I've for years when I worked at a private foundation. And I think a lot gets made of the perks in Congress and stuff. I think one of the things that's been interesting to me, because I used to be a good government advocate and kind of look at Congress and look at travel and all of those, all of those things, that people in Congress do work really hard, whether it's the staff and employees or members of Congress. And I don't think that we have to paint the entire Congress with a brush that maybe represents a handful of folks. But it also doesn't mean that we shouldn't have accountability and transparency in our operation.
So should we know immediately when you put your name on an earmark?
Absolutely.
You think we ever will?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I'll make a point of telling people what I've earmarked if I do that, because I think that I would be proud any day to stand beside the earmark for a needed construction project in my district, or for services that end up going to a local shelter or agency. And so I think there should be transparency, and I'll make a point of doing that, but I think we ought to do it as a Congress, frankly.
So have you changed your mind? You've only been in Congress for half a year, but have you changed your mind about anything that you perceived to be what it was like to be a member of Congress, and then once you got in it, you feel more comfortable today about it?
I feel more comfortable every day that I'm in, Brian. I mean, there's still some things, obviously, that I'm getting used to. I mean, one of those is that it's like a close-knit family in some ways, and you don't always agree with your colleagues. And I think it's really important to separate disagreements over policy with, how you deal with people personally. And so that takes some learning too.
Here's the last clip from your SEIU speech. You said it was Canada. It says Puerto Rico.
Oh, it was Puerto Rico. I went to Canada for something else. It was Puerto Rico.
Sure
You're right.
Let's watch this, and then we'll wrap it up.
I believe and it's why I'm a Democrat. But I believe that there are values that we share for working families, and they're really simple. They're about protecting ourselves and our families. They're about being secure in the world. They're about making decisions that benefit us. And I know that we can do that together, and that there are things that government can, should, and must do for the common good. It's the bargain we strike. Now, we're not asking government to do everything, but we are saying when it comes to health care, there's some government responsibility there. When it comes to protecting us and ensuring peace and diplomacy and making a choice about peace and diplomacy and not about war, that's a government responsibility. And when it comes to, listen, no applause here, I'll tell you, because when it comes to saying that we actually value our families and our communities more than we value corporate greed, that's a government responsibility. So we're going to go from here, and when Anna said fired up and ready to go, you know what? I'm fired up and ready to go. That's right, we're ready to go. Fired up, 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 ready to go. Let's go SEIU. Thank you.
So where did you learn how to give a speech like that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, my son used to say, you know, when he'd have to do career day at school, and all the other mothers and parents would come in, and they're firefighters and they're pilots and all of these things, and he'd say, oh, I don't want my mom to come because all she does is talk and talk. And so I've always been, you know, a talker, and I'm a believer too, Brian. And so it's really easy in some ways. I think I don't even know that I had notes, because I really believe in my heart, and I'm really committed to improving the lives of working people. And so it makes it easy to do that.
What are the chances that people, I mean, you see you being fired up and you have all these ideas, that people are going to get let down in all this with just the obvious problems that we face with money?
Well, I mean, I think that we're at such a low point, quite frankly, that the place to go is up. And I don't think that people expect change overnight. I mean, I go, you know, to senior centers and to our civic organizations and our churches throughout my congressional district, and people don't expect change overnight, but they expect you to be working toward change. And they expect, as an elected official, for me to get up every day thinking about them and thinking about a way to make improvements and a difference in their lives. And I think when they see that, there's going to be a level of patience about the pace with which change can come. And I have to tell you, I have never been, you know, more excited to be joining the 111th Congress and to be working on an agenda for the American people with this President-elect, Barack Obama. I mean, it's a really exciting time. It's an historic time, but it's also a time in which I think that we have to be opportunistic and bold and unafraid to take on some new challenges.
That's it. We're out of time. Thank you, Donna Edwards.
Thank you.
For a DVD copy of this program, call 1-877-662-7726. For free transcripts or to give us your comments about this program, visit us at qna.org. Q&A programs are also available as C-SPAN podcasts.